I'm Mindy Peterson, and this is Enhance Life with Music, where we explore the practical ways music transforms everyday life, health, happiness, and beyond. September is Women in Medicine Month, and there's a brand new book released this week that spotlights the vital contributions of contemporary women in medicine. And it also bridges the science and art of medicine by telling stories of how many of these women have integrated their arts interests and skills into their work. The book is called Girls Become Doctors and Much More: Inspiring Stories of Women in Medicine. The author is with me today. Dr. Olapeju Simoyan has degrees in dentistry, public health, and medicine. She is dually board certified in family medicine and addiction medicine, and is also a skilled musician, photographer, and of course, writer. Congratulations on your new book, and welcome to Enhance Life with Music, Dr. Simoyan.
Thank you so much, Mindy. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited for this
Yeah, it's
discussion.
great to have you here and meet you. We're in a video call, so listeners
Sure.
can't see you, but they
Yeah.
can just hear us. But we've been connected on LinkedIn for a while, and
Yes,
it's
we
just
have.
delightful to actually meet you in virtual person.
It's great to
You're in
meet you
Pennsylvania,
too.
I'm in Minnesota, but we get to view each other by the marvels of modern technology. So great to
Exactly.
meet you. In your book, you talk about what you call the artificial divide between the sciences and the arts, and how convinced you became in your practice that the science and arts are very complementary to one another,
hmm
that medicine is in many ways as much an art as a science.
hmm
So I'm excited to have you tell us more
Sure.
about this. Why should music be integrated into medicine? And how does being a musician, whether amateur or beyond, make someone
hmm
a better physician? And I'll just preface that too by saying you do talk about multiple disciplines of the
hmm
arts in your book. We're
hmm
going to be focusing more on
Yes,
music just because
yes.
that's the focus of this
hmm
podcast. But tell us more.
Yes. So you're right. I think we've had a very, very artificial dichotomy between science and the art, the left brain and the right brain. People talk about being left brained versus right brained, and they think
Right.
of the left brain people as being more logical and maybe mathematical, whatever, and then the right brain people as being more creative and everything. And I like to say that the corpus callosum exists for a reason. And the corpus callosum is a part of the brain that that connects the left and the right, because they're supposed to
Yeah.
work together. They're supposed to work together. And so, just like we have this artificial separation between left and right brain, we also have artificial separations between science and art. And I think that they very much complement each other, and they should. I read somewhere where Albert Einstein said if he hadn't been a physicist, he might have been a musician.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many other examples, but we're not here to talk about Albert Einstein. We're here to talk about women in medicine, right? Right. So I think that we should definitely incorporate music into medicine and healthcare, and people are doing that already. But I think it really needs to become more routine. Music has been shown to be beneficial for patients with Parkinson's disease, improving their quality of life. It helps patients with dementia, with memory. I mean, I'm sure we all know it's easier to remember things when they're set to music than to just memorize them. So music actually impacts more parts of the brain than any other activity as far as we know. And so why not leverage that? Why not take advantage of that and use it, in healthcare to help people recover, and use it in education as well. In addition to helping people with neurological diseases and conditions, music also helps patients who are about to have surgical procedures, for example. It helps them to feel more relaxed. So it reduces stress in those situations. And then even for the people taking care of the patients, for example, some surgeons will listen to music to help them focus while they're operating. So it just has so many benefits. And those are just a few. of the benefits of music in healthcare.
That's interesting that you mentioned that about surgeons using music in the operating rooms to help improve their
Hmm.
concentration and focus.
Hmm.
And I found it really interesting in your book about some of the other clinical skills that are enhanced with music and patient interactions too. In fact, I chuckled when I saw one of the quotes in your book. It was by Dr. Danielle Offrey. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your last name right, but she said, "Try not to lose all of your outside hobbies and passions when pursuing medicine. Not only will they keep you sane, but they'll give you something to talk to your patient about besides their impending colonoscopy."
Exactly. That is, it's so funny, but it's so true. It's so true.
Sure.
Yeah, music can really, it's one of the many things that really can help us to connect with our patients beyond,
Yeah.
beyond talking about their colonoscopies or whatever. And Dr. Danielle Ochry is she's an internist. She's at NYU in New York City. She's an internist, but she's also one of the pioneers of narrative medicine. Narrative medicine. So she's an author, very well established author. She's published several books, but she also plays the cello, and I don't think most people know that about her.
Mm.
So yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Sure. You talk in your book about also how the listening skills that
Yes.
are developed through musical training can enhance patient interaction quality.
Hmm.
And you talk about some of the other arts too, like the related ability to observe minor differences in texture and color for visual artists
Hmm. Hmm.
can enhance the physician's physical diagnosis skills. So that was, again, we're kind of focusing on music, but I thought
Yes.
that was really interesting too.
Yes.
You talk about how the arts and humanities help clinicians become better practitioners by, you said, improving our understanding of the human condition, which I thought, ooh, that's a really interesting way to phrase that, and just increasing practitioners' ability to connect with patients
Hmm.
and also sensitizing them to the social determinants of health. And that phrase is another one that really
Hmm.
caught my attention. I
Hmm.
hadn't really heard so much about that phrase until recently with the movement towards social prescribing is
Hmm.
where I'm starting to hear a lot
Hmm.
more use of that phrase, social determinants of health.
Hmm.
Can you just define that phrase a little bit for listeners if they're not familiar with that?
So when we talk about social determinants of health, I think it's a very much a public health concept where you're not just looking at the patient, but you're looking at the society they live in, the home they live in, their environment, and you're thinking about how all these things contribute to their illness or to their well-being. And in many
Yeah.
cases, our environments contribute in a negative way to our health. For example, if a kid is coming in with asthma attacks and then you're giving them inhalers and giving them medication for asthma, but you're sending them back to a home environment where the parents are smoking, there's,
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
you're not thinking about you're treating the disease, but then you're not addressing the issues that are contributing to it. And that's just one
Sure.
example. There's so many other examples, and then so many of the illnesses that we treat have a behavioral or an environmental component. So when you think about the social determinants of health, you think about the environment the patient is living in, you think about even things like cost of medication. If you prescribe a medication and the patient can't afford it,
Mhm.
then how are they're not going to be able to
Yep,
buy it, so they can't use it, and then they're not going to get better. If that's the medication that they need, they're not likely to get
totally.
better if they actually need that medication, you know. Or you're telling a patient who has diabetes that they need to, talking to them about diet and exercise, but if they live in a place where they don't have access to healthy foods and all they have easy access to is junk food and fast foods, that's not really going to help them. I mean, it's going to be harder for them to have a healthy diet if they don't have access to healthy foods. Or you tell them
Right.
to exercise and to go on walks, but they don't have sidewalks where they live. So it's hard for them to walk
Or it's
because
not
there's
safe
nowhere to,
for
no,
them
no,
to be
it's not
walking
safe.
outside.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that explanation of social determinants of health, really hearing that makes sense to me that somebody who has some background in the arts and humanities would be better able to look at the whole
Hmm.
person
Yes.
and the whole situation involving that human condition when they are seeing patients.
Hmm.
Going back to Dr. Offrey, talking about don't lose all your outside
Yes.
hobbies and passions because number one, it'll keep you sane.
Hmm.
In your book, you talk a lot about in spotlight physicians who talk about how their interests and their skills, their practice of the arts have really helped them maintain balance in their own
Yes.
lives, which makes them a better
Mhm,
physician.
mhm,
So that was really interesting. One person, a pediatrician, Dr. Lisa Wong,
mhm.
said that the piano became her refuge at night when this is when she was in
Medical school,
medical
yes.
school,
Mm,
and she entered medical school and kind of felt like she was somewhat unprepared for the
mhm.
rigors of medical school. And when she discovered a piano
Yes.
in the hospital,
Mhm,
she started playing it at
mhm,
night,
mhm.
and it became her refuge when she needed to, quote, "let medical facts settle in her
Yes,
brain." And
yes.
as soon as she added that piano playing and also theater and art back
Mhm.
into the mix, her grades went up. So that was
Exactly.
really interesting. Yeah, and then you have so many other stories of physicians who incorporated music or other art forms into their work
Mhm.
and expressed that they really felt a need to be engaged in both
Yes,
medicine and art to feel complete.
exactly.
Yeah, what else do you wanna say about that?
Exactly, and I'll give another specific example from that I shared in the book, if that's okay. Dr. Sidel Ross,
Yeah.
who,
Yes.
yeah, was working as an anesthesiologist, and as she puts it, she was taking patients' vital signs and not paying attention to her own vital signs.
Yeah.
And she got to the point where she was just really burnt out. And as a child, as a young child, I think she was a 6-year-old child when she said she wanted to be a singing doctor.
Right.
And as she grew up, she became a doctor, but the singing part kind of got pushed to the background. Like for many of us, we were told
Yeah.
music was a hobby, writing is
Yep.
something you do in your spare time and all of that. But anyway, so she got to the point where she felt like she really needed to take a break. And sometimes we do need to take breaks and do some self-reflection, and just redefine our priorities and, determine
And this is a break from practicing as a
yes,
physician.
yes, yes,
Yeah, she was becoming kind of burned out.
yeah, which happens to a lot of us, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, and so during the time of self-reflection, she just realized that the things that really brought her joy were things like music and
Mm.
specifically in her case, singing. And so she went back to practice with that new understanding of what was important to her and what she needed to do. And one day she just thought, what would happen if I sang at a patient's bedside? What would happen? And sometimes we just need to put ourselves out there. If something is on your heart, sometimes you just take a bold step and just try it out and see what happens. And then her opportunity came. She had a patient who was dying of cancer, and he had been a professional musician, a professional jazz musician, and his dying wish was to have a bedside jam.
Ah,
Yeah. So she ended up organizing that jam. She sang, somebody played I think it was a trumpet and somebody else played the saxophone. And they basically gave him his dying wish. And shortly
wow.
after that, he was gone. But at least they had been able to help him fulfill that wish. And now she incorporates music into what she does on a routine basis.
And that childhood expression of what she wanted to be came full circle because when she
Mm,
was 6 year isn't
ex-
that fascinating that
ex-
sometimes a 6-year-old can know
Exactly,
what they
exactly.
wanna be?
I'm so glad you said that. I think we should really take what kids say seriously because sometimes
Mm.
it sounds like they're just fooling around or messing around. But, I really believe that, okay, so I really love nature. I love butterflies. I also have a book on butterflies, but that's a whole other discussion. And I like thinking about the concepts of metamorphosis with butterflies, and sometimes you wonder when it's in the chrysalis, what exactly is going on and how does it know? I mean, how does it know to become a butterfly, so to speak? You know what I mean? And then I heard a little bit about butterflies and, the whole metamorphosis process and how there's something called an imaginal disc that's in them from the very beginning. So before they become a butterfly, but that has the information that's needed for them to become the full adult butterfly. And I believe that as human beings, we have our own version of the imaginal
Mm.
what you need to become that singing doctor in Dr. Ross's case or whatever it is inside of you. So sometimes you need to just look inside as opposed to you take advice, but at the end of the day, your own quote unquote imaginal disc is inside of
Uh-huh.
you. So you know listen to your heart, you have what it takes to become what you are meant to become. So I just wanted to
Yeah,
throw that in there. Yeah.
that's so interesting, and I've heard it said before that as an adult, if you're trying to think of what should I do for fun,
Mm-hmm.
think back to what you liked to do when you were 5 or 10 years old,
Exactly.
and probably that will still bring you joy. So, as
Exactly.
a parent, any parents who are listening to this who have young kids, I just encourage you to pay attention to what it is that brings your children joy,
Mhm.
because probably this will be something that will bring them joy for the rest of their life, and you can
Exactly.
help them recognize those things.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting. I'm always looking for the best ways to support holistic health and well being through music and beyond. So, when I learned about all natural products created by a holistic biologic dentist, I had to try them out. Did you know that chemicals in commercial mouthwash and toothpaste can be absorbed through the oral tissues even if you don't swallow the product? One of my favorite Living Well with Dr. Michelle products is the Remineralizing Mouthwash. It's alcohol free, so it won't dry out your mouth. And instead of harsh chemicals, it uses colloidal silver to help balance oral bacteria. It's infused with peppermint oil to freshen your breath naturally, and it contains hydroxyapatite, the very mineral your enamel is made of, to support strong teeth and reduce sensitivity. I also love their sensitive remineralizing tooth powder, but I couldn't resist trying their brand new toothpaste. It's not officially labeled for sensitivity, but it's made with microhydroxyapatite, which many people, myself included, find reduces sensitivity. For natural, effective oral care products and 10% off, go to livingwellwithdrmichelle.com and use coupon code MUSICENHANCES10. Link is in the show notes. You had mentioned earlier in our conversation how the integration of the arts into a practitioner's medical work can also improve patient outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned patients with Parkinson's disease, and I know we've talked a lot on this podcast about specific diagnoses and how music can be applied and used as an intervention for those, whether it's multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, and other things. So I'll include some links in the show notes to that. Going back to Dr. Lisa Wong, I chuckled too when I saw that a book that she wrote is called Scales to Scalpels.
Yes.
And she explores discoveries about the interplay between music and the brain. So I'll throw that out there
Yeah.
too as a
Thank you.
really interesting reference for listeners who are interested in digging in
Thank
more.
you.
That
Yeah.
caught my eye, and I thought, ooh, I'd like to read that.
Thank you.
But you mentioned too that incorporating the arts into
Mm-hmm.
practice can benefit caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
It can help with their stress reduction
Mm-hmm.
in multiple ways. And again, we've covered some of those on the show, so we won't spend too much time on that here. One thing that jumped out to me in your book, the first time I saw this term, is you talked about the term medical humanities.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, ooh, I have not heard of that before.
Really?
It was really I hadn't. Yeah. So I did a quick search for a definition, and the definition that came back to me said medical humanities refers to the interdisciplinary field that explores the human experience of health, illness,
Mm-hmm.
and healthcare through the lens of the humanities.
Mm-hmm.
It draws on disciplines like literature, history, philosophy, ethics, and the arts to provide a deeper understanding of these experiences beyond the purely scientific or clinical aspects. And I saw that there's actually a health humanities consortium. So I found that really interesting. Anything else you want to say about this
Yeah.
medical humanities
Well,
entity?
well, I'm glad you found that definition because I think it's a very good one. And it's not
Okay.
something I would have been able to come up with on my own. So
Okay.
kudos to you for doing the homework. But I would like to say that actually, I went to medical school at Penn State College of Medicine in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And our institution was the first medical school in the US, maybe the world, I don't know, but definitely in the US to have a department of humanities, the first medical school to have a department of humanities in the country. And so they
Kudos to them.
Yes, and they placed a lot of emphasis on this, and it was an integral part of our medical education. We had a required humanities course that we took as part of our first year of medical school. And in our second year, I think it was focused on medical ethics. But in the first year, it was more general, and then in the fourth year, we were still required to take a humanities elective course. We had a bunch of courses that we could choose from. But like in the first year, we would have sessions on topics like death and dying, spirituality and healthcare, caring
Mm.
for the poor. We would have speakers. We would have essays that we had to write, written assignments that we had to do. And I think it was a very important. I mean, it showed that they understood the importance of this aspect. Taking you away from the anatomy lab and the classroom, and just sitting and talking about life, real life. How do
Mhm.
you discuss, share a diagnosis with a patient who has a terminal illness? How do you deal with a patient having a terminal illness, and maybe they don't know, and their family members think that they shouldn't be told because that's their culture. How do you
Uh-huh.
deal with all these cultural,
Yeah.
differences that impact the way you practice? There was just so many things that are so important, but they're not taught in all medical schools necessarily, or not addressed, but they're things that you will encounter in real life. So I think it was a very important part of my education. And for me, it also just showed me that, I mean, it exposed me to a lot. And in fact, some of the foundations of this book started out with the exposure I got as a medical student at Penn State. I had all these experiences. And when I later on did a medical humanities fellowship as a faculty member, I curated a small exhibit. And then at some point, years later, I started thinking about putting the contents into a book. And one thing just led to the other and led to the other. And now I have these stories and the stories of many other women in medicine in this book, as well as my own stories too. Because at first I wasn't even planning to write about myself, but it somehow,
I'm glad you did.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the point of writing about other women physicians and not writing about myself? Who's going
Right.
to tell my own story? So, yeah.
Right. And part of your story is you were drawn to music and the arts as a child,
Yes.
ended up going into medicine, but you talk a lot about professional identity
Hmm. Hmm.
and how it gets kind of complicated for those of you who have significant interests outside of medicine.
Exactly.
And sometimes there's this sense that you need to keep those
Hmm.
identities separate. I'm a physician, and
Yeah.
on the side,
Hmm.
completely separate identity, I enjoy this form of art, whether it's music or visual art or theater, whatever it is. And obviously, your book is a lot about combining those.
Yes.
And you came to a point, as well as some of these other female
Hmm.
doctors that we've talked about, where they recognize the need to integrate those two
Yes.
identities, and it's all me. It's all. But tell us a
Exactly.
little. Yeah, tell us about how your musical identity and pursuits have informed and enhanced your work as a physician. I know there's lots of stories in your book
Hmm.
about Dr. Wong and Dr. Sadell.
Ross. Yeah, Ross.
Yes, that you mentioned.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's so many stories about how these various doctors have
Hmm.
integrated their artistic pursuits into their work. But tell us how, for you personally,
Yes.
your musical identity and pursuits have informed and enhanced your work as a doctor.
Thank you. Like you said, I really, really struggled with this, and at first I was just like kind of keeping them separate, or maybe at the most, I would engage in activities with medical students where we were, like maybe they would have a talent show and I would participate and things like that, or bring the ukulele group that I was a part of to the medical school to participate in the talent show. But more recently, while I was working at an inpatient addiction facility, I would have group sessions with the teenagers and young adults. That's a group I really like working with. And it was during there were group sessions, but I would talk to them about the developing brain and how their brains were, their prefrontal cortex wasn't yet fully developed. And that's why we can't always count on them to make the best decisions and all of that, and then talk to them about drugs and stuff like, and then, yeah. And at first it was really, I would give the talk and, interact with them, and that was it. And then at some point I decided it just occurred to me, why don't I, incorporate music? So I started taking my ukulele, and that's the nice thing about the ukulele. It's so portable. It's so easy to
Yes,
carry
unlike
around.
a piano.
Exactly. Yeah. So I started taking my ukulele to the session, and then after all the fun stuff about the brain and all that, I would just end with a song and play it. And then there were times when maybe one of the patients was musical and maybe they had a song that they wanted to sing and perform. And the one instance that comes to mind is that there was this teenage girl who had brought her ukulele to treatment. She hadn't planned on, but her mother encouraged her to. And so she had her ukulele with her, and she had actually composed a song while she was in treatment. And she shared this song with us, and it was so moving. But I wish I had written the words and kept them because I don't remember what the words were, but it was so moving. And
Ah.
yeah,
Well, what a way for the other participant. This is
exactly.
a group session, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
what an amazing way to connect and kind of bond as a group and
Exactly.
to show the others in the group what's possible.
Exactly,
And to make
exactly.
herself vulnerable by sharing that. I mean, I can imagine there are so many ripple effects for her, for the others
Exactly.
in the group, for you. I'm sure that was so
Oh, yeah,
validating
it wa
to
it was very validating. And I would have, patients, maybe after the session make comments like, "Oh, this was the best group session I've attended since I've been here." I mean,
ah,
I'm not taking credit for that, but it really was validating
yeah.
to hear comments like that. Or another time I sang for a patient and played my ukulele again, and he's like he made a comment about how think he said he was tired before, but now he feels spiritually uplifted. So
Mm,
getting that kind of feedback is really, really very
yes.
validating, and it really says that yeah, we are doing something right. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and just that I can imagine as a physician, being able to incorporate something like the arts into your work would be so fulfilling because it's just the next layer of congruence in your life.
Exactly.
Where, yeah, every part of who you are, you're bringing it all together in
Exactly.
this synthesis, and everything's in sync, and it's
Hmm.
enhancing your own personal life, it's
Exactly.
enhancing your patients' lives, it's bringing about better outcomes
Mhm.
therapeutically. So, yeah, I can totally see how that would just be priceless.
Yeah, yeah.
We talked about how kids, a lot of times the things that bring them joy
Mhm.
will bring them joy for the rest of their
Exactly.
lives, and I kind of referenced the fact that you were one of those kids who really related to music and
Hmm.
enjoyed it as a child.
Hmm.
Your family was like a lot of families where piano playing was considered just, air quotes, just a
Hmm.
hobby. And when you said when you were in high school, your father looked at your report card and made a statement about how you were getting strong in the
Yeah,
arts, and he was kind of concerned
yeah,
about that because he really wanted you to become a doctor
yeah.
and didn't want anything to be taking away from that. In my day job, I do work with a lot of music educators in colleges and universities and also K through 12
Hmm.
teachers. And I hear from a lot of, particularly the college faculty, that
Hmm.
a lot of parents of their students feel that, that was fine for you to take music lessons or be in band when you were in elementary school, maybe even middle school. But once they get older, high
Hmm.
school and for sure college, they want their kids to get serious, and there's no money in that. You need to focus on training for your vocation. They really don't want they sort of discourage their children from taking musical classes and pursuing that at all in college. So, for you, as someone who has degrees in dentistry, public health, medicine, board certified, dually, what advice do you have for parents
Oh.
whose kids have arts interests? Can you share some perspective with them?
Okay. Remember how we said earlier that that music affects so many different parts of the brain?
Yeah.
So people need to understand that. I think they're making a big mistake when they discourage their kids or their students from studying music or from sticking with it, because music can enhance learning. In fact, that's my other, aside from the impact on healthcare, I'm also an educator. I feel very, very strongly about how music can help learning and it can help us to actually improve the way we teach, improve the way we learn. And if you think about it, if a young child is learning to play the piano, for example, think about all the different things that are going on. They're using their fingers, they're using their eyesight, reading the music. They're using their hearing, if they're using pedals. And think about all the hand eye coordination going on, hand eye foot coordination, everything. And if that's develops at an early age, think about how it can be translated into other skills and other areas of life. You know what I'm saying? There's
Sure.
just so many ways in which music can enhance learning and or enhance how we perform other skills. Another thing I like to think about is the fact that music is actually very mathematical. And for somebody like me, I really struggled. I still struggle with rhythm. You can ask my music teacher. I still struggle with rhythm. But if you think about it, it's mathematical, 3/4 timing, 4/4 timing, 2/4 timing. That's all fractions. You know,
Sure.
there could be kids who struggle with math, who struggle with fractions the way they're taught in a traditional classroom. But some of those kids might be musically inclined, whereas they understand the mathematical concepts because they come naturally to them. So for such kids, maybe you could use music to teach them math, if that makes
Mm,
sense. And that's just one example. There's
yeah.
so many other things I could talk about in the
Sure.
medical school setting too. I think about how, heart rhythms, you could teach about rhythm. You could have somebody tap out different rhythms and then tell them that's the way your heart sounds, blub, 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 blub. That's the
Yeah.
regular heart rhythm. Then this is an irregular rhythm. This is an extra heart sound. I mean, there's just so many different applications, but I think that we really do need to take advantage of what we know about music to help enhance learning and enhance our educational systems. That's something I feel very passionate about as well.
I think too about what you said earlier in our conversation about how music activates all areas of the brain, and we don't really know of anything else that does that. You
Yes,
talked about
yes.
the corpus callosum and
Hmm.
how music strengthens that. And actually, I'm not a doctor, so correct me if I'm not articulating this properly, but my understanding is that if you do a functional MRI of a
Hmm.
musician's brain, that
Hmm.
corpus callosum is thicker than in non-musicians, and that really reflects the enhanced communication between the two sides of the brain.
So,
Did I get
Uh,
that out right?
yeah, yes, yes. I think you're correct about the MRI findings. Again, that's not my area of expertise. I haven't done research, but I've
Okay.
read that as well. And but it makes perfect sense. It makes
Yeah,
perfect sense that the two parts of the brain are integrated, and the more the more you do these things, the more you engage in specific activities, the more you strengthen those brain connections.
sure. So going back to what you said about music learning enhances other learning. So I find that really compelling. And
Mhm.
also some of these powerful stories that you share in the book and that we talked about, where you have physicians who had a real heart for music, and when they tried to cut that interest in music out of their lives, they really suffered in terms of their grades and ability to focus. So that one doctor, once she put music back into her life, her grades went up, her ability to focus went up. And then the other doctor, Dr. Ross,
Mhm.
who actually felt that she needed to take time off
Yeah.
from her
Mhm.
practice as a physician,
Mhm.
and it was rediscovering that joy of music that
Mhm.
gave her what she needed to feel complete and get
Yes.
back into practicing again, this time incorporating music
Yes.
into her practice. So,
Mhm.
really found those stories really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're out of time, but just real quick before we close, can you tell us? I know you mentioned Penn State and how they were sort of pioneers in incorporating medical humanities into
Mhm.
their medical classes
Mhm.
for new doctors in training.
Mhm.
Are you seeing any changes or trends
Mhm.
in the space of medical education, education of doctors? Are you seeing movement toward medical schools recognizing the importance of arts and medicine and incorporating some of that into their training of the
Mhm.
next generation of practitioners?
Yes, actually, I think there's a whole movement now in that direction, which is really good. I know other schools have medical humanities courses. They're probably more likely to be electives than requirements, but at
Okay.
least at least they're available. Like Drexel University College of Medicine has medical humanities electives that students can take part in. And I was involved in helping to develop a medical humanities curriculum for residents at Reading Hospital, where I live. Yes. And actually, the AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges, has an initiative called the FRAME Initiative. The FRAME stands for Fundamental Role of Arts and Humanities in Medical Education. So they actually gave out small grants to institutions to develop programs in the arts and the humanities for
Oh,
medical
great.
trainees. So people are beginning to recognize the importance of incorporating the arts and humanities into medical education. So hopefully we'll see
Wonderful.
more and more such programs, and as people realize and appreciate the importance.
Great. Well, I appreciate you telling us about that
Mhm.
organization. And also, I know in your book you mention quite a few organizations. There's International Society for Arts and Medicine. You talk about the American Medical Women's Association. They have both a music and
That is,
medicine committee
mhm,
and a humanities and
mhm.
medicine committee that work pretty closely
Yes.
together. So, for listeners who want to dig in more to this topic, especially if you are a physician of any sort, definitely check out those organizations. We'll put links in the show notes. Just a couple quotes I want to leave listeners with from your book that I really liked. One is a quote of yours in the book, of course. You said, "It's time to do away with the artificial dichotomy between the arts and sciences. To become better clinicians, we should all embrace a holistic approach to medical education and healthcare in general." Really appreciated
Thank
that. And
you.
then the foreword by Kim Downey,
Yes.
loved her foreword or
Thank
his, I'm
you.
not sure. Kim said, "This collection reminds us that a career in medicine is not just about science, but about people, art,
Mhm.
and evolution in the way we care for others." So really appreciated that quote
Yes.
as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks for this book. I'll, of course, have a link in the show notes to the book.
Sure.
Congratulations
Thank
again
you.
on the release and this being out into the world.
Thank you so
As you
much.
know, yes, of course. Dr. Simoyan, as you know, I ask all my guests to close out our conversation with a musical ending, a coda, by sharing a song or story about a moment that music enhanced your life. Do you have a song or story that you can share with us today?
Well, what an opportunity. I just recorded my version of This Little Light of Mine. It's a song that probably many of us grew up singing, whether in church or wherever, but this is my version. So the second and the third verses are my words. I made up
Okay.
my own lyrics to the second and third verses, and we just recorded it. But it's meant to supplement the book because I believe that we let our light shine by telling these wonderful stories of women in medicine and helping each other to shine, telling people that, there's more than one way to be a doctor. And yeah, so
Yes.
I really believe that we let our light shine by bring our whole selves to whatever we do. So if you're a doctor and you're musical, find a way of expressing yourself musically, whether you do it in the clinical setting or outside. If you're an artist, the same thing. Don't feel like you have to ignore part of who you are to be a doctor or to be anything. I'm talking about doctors because that's what I am and that's what I wrote about. But
Yep.
but this I think applies to anybody. Be the best version of yourself, and you do that by being your true self and bringing all your gifts and talents to whatever you do. So let your light shine. So the other verses that I made up were let's spread peace and joy, and let's spread love and light and help each other shine.
Let's spread peace and joy and help each other shine. Let's spread peace and joy and help each other shine. Let's spread peace and joy and help each other shine. Let us shine, let us shine all the time. Let us shine all the time.
Thank you, Dr. Simoyan, for that reminder and inspiration, and also for this focus on women in medicine and how the arts and sciences complement one another. There are links in the show notes to the book and other ways to connect with Dr. Simoyan and her work. You'll also find a transcript of our conversation and related episodes you may enjoy, including the use of music in surgeries, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis, and also a link to all episodes related to science and health. Just a reminder at this back to school time of year that you can view all episodes organized by category. one of which is science and health that I just mentioned, but another is education and community, which I know is especially top of mind this time of year. So if you're looking for education-related resources as you launch this new learning season, whether it's for yourself, your kiddos, or your classroom, click that link in the show notes or in the archives tab of my website. All Enhanced Life with Music episodes are evergreen, so check out the back catalog for more ways that music can make your life better. Finally, I'm kicking off my own adventure with this new season, a brand new email newsletter called Sound Bites. Some of you have already signed up through my website. Thank you. And now I'm excited to bring it to life. Sound Bites will be an occasional note from me, probably once a month, sharing free giveaways, inspiring quotes, behind the scenes photos, and simple hacks to transform everyday life with music. It's a more personal way to stay connected beyond the podcast. To join the list, just click the link in the show notes or head to my website and choose newsletter from the menu. You can always connect with me on email, mindy@mpetersonmusic.com, Facebook, Instagram, X, or LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing this show. Until next time, may your life be enhanced with music.